I come from a mixed family. My mother has some children from previous marriage, and then me with my father. I had a beautiful garden. My mother really had green fingers and she loved gardening. One of my first memories is really being surrounded by nature and being in a very beautiful garden atmosphere. And that was kind of like my sanctuary there. My father, he did many things in the medical profession, but he started out in midwifery actually, and then he became a psychiatric nurse, and then he went on to become a GP and a chiropodist, actually, specializing with the feet. It was the early 70s, and it was very difficult for my father, who lived for medicine. He just wanted to pursue this passion of his, and it was very difficult in that time in a small mining village in the middle of England in the early 70s for kind of a black African doctor to develop, if you like, his career. And so he invited my mother and all of our family to move back to West Africa. But it was difficult for my mother to do that because, my older siblings were kind of in the middle of their kind of exams and education, and it would have been difficult to kind of suddenly take them from a small mining village in the middle of England to kind of black Africa in the early 70s. So there was no animosity in the departure, but I was the only mixed child in my family. Which was an interesting dynamic. I didn't really recognize any differentiation, if you like, until I got to secondary school. There was a lot of quite cruel prejudice and physical violence, actually, and it was this kind of like singling out and name-calling and much more insidious things than that. I didn't really share the things with my mother because my mother was a nurse. She was having to deal with a lot of things. My older brothers, who were strong and well kind of respected in the community, had left school, and I learned to defend myself very quickly. I mean, I grew up in a big family, so I learned these things before. This particular instance, I was in an English class, I remember, and there was an Irish kid there. He was new, his family had just come there. His frustration, he just decided to target his frustration on me, but with this kind of racial slurring, and we were walking down the stairs to go to our next class, and he had kicked me down the stairs, actually, and it turned into a big fight. I was feeling furious, actually. I really finished that conflict. It was a bloody mess. It was continuous, strong, aggressive kind of violence. For many years, when they would start something with me, I was strong enough and fit enough to be able to finish it. There were some times when I would ask my brothers for support, and there were times when my brothers would come to the school and wait at the school to make sure that I could go home safely. But for the most part, I had to try to manage these things on my own. I didn't want to worry my mother. I started to feel hopeless and helpless. My sisters were like my mother. They were like my surrogate mothers. It's like they would patch me up on a daily basis. They would put plasters on my cuts. They would clean me up when I was bleeding. They would make food for me. They would make sure that I had a good packed lunch. I eventually got expelled from that school. It was the kind of last conflict, really. I was sitting in the dining hall. I was having my food, and there was a guy there who had been building up this kind of like conflict with me, and he emptied a whole glass of water onto my food. It became unedible. You couldn't eat it, and we didn't have a lot of money. So I couldn't really afford to get another meal, and I was very cross with that. So I took the jug of water and I threw it on him, and then he threw something on me, and then I chased him, and I beat him up very badly. yeah, we were taken to the principal's office, and it was made clear that he had started it with me, and he got what he kind of deserved. And on that day, the principal had said to me, "For your own safety, we're expelling you from the school. It's not because you're the bad person. It's just that we just cannot expel everybody else, and we don't seem to be able to address this. Culture has been going on for many years." So yeah, I went home and I tried to explain it to my parents, who were not in a good space at that time with each other, and they were not in a good space. My mother was not in a good space with her menopausal period, and so there was no compassion for that. Actually, that was not understood. It was like, oh, you must have, because I mean, I had done a violence with somebody, and it was a very strong violence on that occasion. So, and my mother's emotions just spilled over the top, and she said to me, "I just can't cope anymore, and you have to go away. You have to leave the house." I was kicked out of school, and then I was kicked out of my house, and I was just in a bit of a daze. The whole thing was like quite shocking. Like, I had not seen my mother kind of. Yes, yeah. She was sad a lot of times. My mother's thing was that she would get sad about things, but not angry. And then a bus started to come, so I got on a bus. I went to the main town, and then I went there to the pool hall. And my friend Tristan his mother was also a nurse, and he said, "Come with me." He said, "My mum likes you. She really loves you, actually, and you can stay with us."